And this for me is the most significant of all, which is what I call the pyramid-Earth ratio, which is that if you carefully measure the Great Pyramid, measure its base perimeter, and multiply by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. You get a printout of the exact measurement of the equator of our planet. And if you measure the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by the same number, you get the polar radius of the Earth. So the dimensions of our planet were encoded into the Great Pyramid on a scale of 1 to 43,200, a very long time before anybody is ever supposed to have known that we even lived on a planet, let alone what its size was. Again, this is something that Egyptologists are aware of, but because they fundamentally despise the ancients, they say that it must be a coincidence, that there cannot be any plan to this. It's just an accident that the Great Pyramid models the Earth. I would be more willing to buy that if the number 43,200 was a random number, but it's not a random number. It is also a number that is derived from a key motion of the Earth itself. And that motion is called the precession of the equinoxes. And these sums that get us to 43,200 hint at what is going on here. The Earth has a wobble on its axis. That wobble has noticeable effects on stellar alignments. It's particularly noticeable at the pole. Right now, the North Pole of the Earth points pretty much directly at the star that we call Polaris, and that is our pole star. But because the axis of the Earth transcribes this great circle in the heavens over a period of just under 26,000 years, it means that there are times when the pole points at empty space, and at other times it points at other stars. It's only a temporary arrangement that it's pointing from all around the world. It's just absolutely clear. This number system was deliberately encoded into ancient myths. There's a tremendous study of this done by Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Deschen called Hamlet's Mill, where they conclude that what they call some almost unbelievable ancestor civilization took the trouble to deliberately encode the numbers of precession into myths, to encode them into great stories that would be passed down. The storyteller didn't need to know he was passing down astronomical information. All he needed to do was tell the story true. For some reason, that system of numbers was very important to the ancients. If we go to Giza, we find the Great Sphinx gazing due east towards the horizon. And we find a stela between the paws of the Great Sphinx, which tells us that the Sphinx marks the splendid place of the first time. First time was a concept in ancient Egyptian ideas. It was called Zep Tepi. It was the time, thousands of years in the past, when the gods settled in Egypt and created a system around which ancient Egypt was built. This stela was not put there by the builders of the Sphinx. This stela was put there by Pharaoh Thutmosis IV in the New Kingdom around about 1400 BC. And Thutmosis IV, it's called the Dream Stela because he fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx while hunting one day and had a dream that the Sphinx spoke to him and told him that he must clear and renovate it. It was covered up to its shoulders in sand at that time. And he did that job, renovated the Sphinx, put up the stela to commemorate the event, and told us that it marks the splendid place of the first time. Now there's one other piece of information on that stela which has come off in the last 100 years, which was a single syllable kaf. The rest of the line was missing, and that single syllable kaf did not have a royal cartouche around it. But because of that single syllable kaf, Egyptologists have given the Sphinx to the pharaoh Khafre. They say that Thutmosis was telling us that Khafre built the Sphinx. This is a very dubious argument. Thutmosis might not have been referring to Khafre at all. There should have been a cartouche around that Sphinx. And he might have been telling us that Khafre was an earlier restorer of the Sphinx. I think it's much more interesting that the Sphinx marks the splendid place. It's clear that the precession of the equinoxes will never alter the rising point of the sun. What it alters is the stars that rise behind the sun at dawn on the spring equinox. And therefore the Sphinx will be gazing at different constellations of the zodiacs over a period of 26,000 years in a great circle. And this is an important fact. Now, the precession runs in the opposite direction to our normal passage through the zodiac. So it goes Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, etc. We're coming out of the age of Pisces now and into the age of Aquarius. And the sun rests in each of the constellations of the zodiac for 2,160 years, which is 30 multiplied by 72. And the total cycle, the great year, is 25,920 years, which is that in 10,500 BC, or broadly speaking between 10,000 BC and 11,000 BC, between 12 and 13,000 years ago, this was what was happening at Giza at dawn on the spring equinox. The sun is rising in the constellation of Leo. This is the age of Leo the lion. At the moment that the sun bisects the horizon, the constellation of Orion is exactly due south, and the three belt stars are in the pattern of the three pyramids on the ground. The Great Sphinx is a leonine, lion-bodied monument, gazing, we argued, at its own celestial counterpart in the sky. There's even a mirroring of the Milky Way and the River Nile. Of course, I'm not saying that whoever made this actually put the River Nile there. But what I'm saying is that the site was chosen because it was there. Because this was a place where the sky of what we call 10,500 BC could be mirrored on the ground with a series of monuments. And in other words, that they are casting back to an ancient time in the design that is placed on the ground. It's interesting that a number of sites around the world, including Caracas, where this group is going to be going, are on a grid of longitude that relates to Giza in terms of the numbers of precession, separated by significant numbers that are divided by 72. And one of the interesting sites is Angkor in Cambodia, which is exactly 72 degrees of longitude east of Giza. And Angkor has 72 major temples. Now, I don't dispute that these temples were built about 1,000 years ago, in fact around 1100 AD. But what I'm suggesting is that they are the latest incarnations of much earlier temples, and that the site itself is vastly more ancient than 1100 AD. In fact, Angkor has a meaning in ancient Egyptian. It means life to the Horus. The Great Sphinx was Horus of the horizon. And Angkor Wat is a peculiarly pyramidal monument, and it is laid out according to the cardinal directions with the same degree of precision that the Great Pyramid of Giza is. We're east of Angkor Wat in a Cambodian military helicopter here, and we're looking west, way along that causeway which just disappears over the horizon about 10 or 15 miles away. But if you stand on this causeway inside the precinct of Angkor Wat, if you stand in the middle of it at dawn on the spring equinox, this is what you see. You see that Angkor is the same thing as the Sphinx. It's an equinoctial marker.